let's switch gears and talk about the workspaces, which is a very similar conversation to this, just a slightly different context. And if for some reason you think of a GSS question, don't worry, just throw that back out there and we'll talk about that, okay? So just give me a couple of seconds here. Let me shut this bad boy down. And let's start this one up. Okay, now while that is loading, let's go ahead and talk about the workspaces here. All right. So with the workspaces, we're going to talk about a couple of themes, right? The modernization obviously is probably the big one there. Productivity and then simplicity is really what we were going for with these things, right? I'll kind of explain the methodology behind, what we were going for there here in a second here. We are shooting for an optimized end user experience, right? When we say end user, we're not talking about the actual your end users, right? We're talking about those, I hate to say junior admin, right? But those level 1 workers, the help desk workers, the service workers, the folks who are not the Altiris admins is what we're trying to target here, right? And I don't think it's a secret that the ITMS product is very usable. It doesn't take much time really to kind of understand the methodologies behind it and how it works, but there is a bit of an art to it, right? I mean, it takes some time to really kind of navigate, where's the right place to do this? What's the ramification if I put, targets and filters here versus there? What do policies do? How do these different pieces affect themselves, right? And while all of that matters, for someone who is answering a help desk call, they just need to push a piece of software out. They could really care less what kind of magic happens behind the scenes, right? And that's a very common use case we run into there. So we were faced with a couple of kind of decisions, if you will, or opportunities in order to address that concern. One was to just gut the console entirely, right? Start this whole thing from the ground up, turn it into very much a kind of a wizard-driven approach and go down that road. That was something we considered, and it's still kind of on the table in the background there. The concern was twofold. One was we would have answered and helped those individuals that needed this solution to be a little bit easier to use, but we would have broken the experience that you folks are used to. At that point, all of the advanced functionality that we're known for, you wouldn't be able to have access to, right? So that would have been problematic right out of the gate. The other problem was it would have taken us an obscene amount of time to actually go down that road, and we would have been playing this game trying to, expose features and figure out who uses what, and it just would have been, problematic. And so we decided that an appropriate approach actually was to kind of create almost like a middleware console, if you will, right? That sits in between the back-end administrator, which most of you folks would be considered now, and the frontline workers who are servicing various aspects of the environment itself. We built this, again, it's HTML5, it's totally browser agnostic, right? It's designed using the ASDK itself. So everything you see that we do inside of this worker console here is using those APIs to connect back and forth, right? Some of you in this room have actually built your own portals, if you will, using the SDK itself. I know our good friend Michael here works with some folks who have gone nuts with the ASDK itself and built some really advanced consoles and API calls and things of that nature there. And so we were trying to bridge that gap there. We wanted this to be easy to learn and easy to use, right? We wanted one of these folks who didn't know anything about Altiris, nor did they care what Altiris even was, to be able to open up one of these portals and say, I need to deliver a piece of software or look up an end user, right, and see what machine they're attached to. We wanted it to be as intuitive as possible, and this gave us the ability to do just that. And then just as far as general flexibility and agility, right, we wanted you to be able to bounce around and navigate in a way that made sense, right? The current console, if you will, the current Altiris product is designed around a functional UI approach, right? So in other words, I'm a patch administrator. These are the 100 things patch management is designed to do. You tell me which button you want to press and I'll take care of the work, right? That's a fundamentally different conversation than saying, I don't care what the product does, I just want to push a patch out, right? They're kind of coming at the same problem from a different angle there. And so we wanted to take the approach, the latter approach for this, where those workers could say, I'm only responsible for pushing patches out or pushing software out. I just want to click my button and do my job and let somebody else kind of worry about some of those advanced features or pieces of functionality in the background, right? So I want to be clear about a couple of things. This is not designed to replace the existing console. And again, there's some 50-50 on that one, right? There are definitely some parts of the console I think all of us would like to see replaced, but there are a lot of different pieces there that wouldn't make sense to replace, right? That work just fine there. So we're going to keep moving these in tandem, and as we go forward, we will be introducing additional quick tasks and what have you there as well to help us with additional pieces of functionality. Okay. All right. So one of the first things we wanted to do was set up kind of an inventory approach, right? And from the most basic function, if you will, right? Somebody needs to do a search. They need to find something, right? Whether it's what computer you're working on, a piece of software that exists and is deployable in the environment, right? We wanted to have that be something very easy to do. And so you'll see in the UI, the top left corner has a giant magnifying glass ready to go, and you can search all resources directly in there, right? So it's designed to be as straightforward and easy as possible there. Once you're in and you actually find whatever it is you're looking for, this is where you get a little bit more detail about what's going on. So health status, right? What kind of hardware? You'll see they're almost like tabs, right? Little blades down at the bottom there for hardware, software, agent health. You have the ability to deliver software to these resources, run tasks. There's some quick links on the side that give you access to other pieces of information there. And so, again, for those of you who are advanced users, you may be saying, well, I can already look this up, right? There's nothing special there. But I want you to try to think about, again, some of those level 1 workers and say, well, how many screens would I have had to send them to? How long would it have taken me to show them kind of where to go and how to look some of this stuff up? And now they can just type it in and be done with it, right? I mean, you can type in Rob Barker and it'll bring up a list of resources assigned to Rob, in that search there. And so I know quite a few of you have run into those situations where your teams are distributed. You've got security folks, you've got asset folks, you've got help desk folks, all these different people that need access to this data, but not necessarily access to the entire tool itself. And so this will help out with that. Okay. So, again, from a software inventory perspective, same thing we just talked about, right? So, rather than looking at hardware details, you can see, pieces of software that have been installed, what version, installation dates, so on and so forth, right? So it's very easy for someone, on the help desk to just look this up. Because this is just a regular old browser connection, and it's browser agnostic. I know a lot of you are using ServiceNow, right? As an example, just out of curiosity, how many folks, use something like a ServiceNow? Okay, so a few of you, right? So those types of tools, whether it's ServiceNow or Remedy or even our own Service Desk application, right? You can just embed this in an iframe and give them access to that and make it transparent, right? So they'd be able to look up those resources without even realizing they're using a separate tool, okay? Of course, agent health inventory, right, is always in there, right? Kind of hit and miss, nothing magical there. We're all familiar with how that works here. Deploy software, of course, we can choose the deploy software or deliver software button. You'll notice from a theming perspective, this is very similar to what we just saw a second ago with the GSS console and the ability to choose from the jobs that were listed on the pane right there. This is really just a catalog is what this is, right? So this is every piece of deliverable software, if you will, that is available based on that person's ID, right? So this does respect role and scope security. So for example, if Yashim only wants to give, certain individuals access to, low-level applications, right? Like a Visio viewer, for example, that's all they'd be able to see right here. Maybe another advanced level administrator may have access to the full version of Visio, for example. So you still have access to that, okay? Down below, you can see we can click around here a little bit and get access to, how many endpoints have actually been selected here for deployment, right? You can grab multiple folks right here. Kind of treats them, again, very similar like a shopping cart style experience, if you will, okay? And then once you actually deploy that, it's very similar to what you saw with the TCM style interface, right? Where you can see these are the endpoints that are ready to deploy software. There may potentially be some issues on these endpoints. Maybe they're missing prereqs or something like that, right? Those are the types of things we're going for there. Kind of a pre-flight analysis, if you will, and then you can go ahead and just execute at that point, right? Running tasks is the same thing. You have access to the task catalog, jobs and tasks. You can choose whatever it is you need to do right there. Go ahead and execute them and push them forward and have a nice day, right? So very easy, very straightforward. The evolution of this is to add additional pieces in there. I know remote control is a little bit of a 4-letter word right now, but being able to, click a tile and have remote access to a system would be a great example of that. Patching is another huge one for us. There are a lot of situations where you as administrators may choose which patches are approved or not, but once they're approved, it's perfectly okay for those level 1 workers to go ahead and push those out as needed, right? And so we want to give that ability to do that as well. That requires a little working on our part, and it's part of that Similar conversation we were talking about yesterday with the time critical management, being able to do things like patch now and what have you there. So a lot of these stories really interconnect, if you will, and kind of fall along the same lines. And once we get some of these other pieces sorted out, you'll see access to those as well. And then, as I mentioned, in the future, it'd be amazing to see things like imaging dashboards, associated right here, and some actual dashboards, right, as far as reports and statistics and things of that nature there. And so, because this is an HTML5 product, right? That gives us a lot of flexibility right out of the gate, right there, to be able to do a lot of different things. And because we're using the ASDK to pull this data back and forth, it means that our flexibility is very high, right, in terms of what we can and can't do there. So as far as us adding things like reports or just about anything you could ever possibly do in the traditional console into this console, it's just a matter of making sure it's the right thing to do for that target audience, if you will, that we're going after. And you may find in some cases for you yourselves that you spend 60% of your time in this console just doing the day-to-day activities and only getting into the back-end one if you need to do something a little bit more advanced. That's perfectly okay too, to be able to do that. So as far as this is concerned, I mean, accessing this thing, once you upgrade to 8.5, you'll have access to it directly. It also respects role and scope security. So let's go ahead and make sure I open the right one here. Like this. Sorry for the blinking. Inside the console itself, if you click on Home, you'll actually have access to the endpoint management workspaces themselves. When you open this, it'll bring up a new tab for you. You'll be able to note the URL there. So if that's something you wanted to publish, on a SharePoint site or whatever that is, you're welcome to do that, or create a group policy to deploy those shortcuts. If you want to, open this in something like Chrome, you just copy the link in there and you're able to toss that over. And there you go. So as I mentioned, you got your search bar up at the top left right here. So you can see all the resources that are available. Very simple, straightforward view of whether or not it's a physical computer or virtual machine listed there. So if I type in that Win 10 box that we've been playing with during the week here, do a search, you'll see it pops up. It's listed as a virtual machine. It's very snappy, very quick to attach to. I get some basic information about this. I can see, the hardware, of course, that's part of that particular platform there. You have some shortcuts on the right-hand side to shrink down and look at, whether it's memory or drive space and what have you there. This is that resource viewer, if you will, right, that's in the classic console that exists right there. Any software that's installed on that resource as well. I can search through this if I'm looking to see if there's a particular piece of software that I need to verify exists on that endpoint. I can do that. And then of course I can look at the agent health as well. So if for some reason, where somebody's complaining because they were supposed to get a copy of Office and it never got installed, maybe the help desk wants to check and see if the agents are functioning correctly first before they, play with anything else, right, as a troubleshooting step. So you'd have access to that. And then from here, this is as simple as me saying, well, you know what? So this is Rob's machine. This is his Win 10 box. I need to go ahead and deliver a piece of software to him. Let me click on that. And then I can search the catalog, and in this case, it's a demo system. I don't have any software publishable or pushable in here just yet, but they would be able to select whatever they wanted at that point and would behave just like it normally would, right? So the software packages themselves are no different than if you were in the classic console and you right-clicked on something and said, do a quick delivery or do a managed delivery policy, right? Any piece of software that's pushable would be listed right here, okay? And then as we move forward and bridge that gap with the time critical management pieces as well, you'll start to see the ability to push that software out and say, do you want to push it out right now, right? And we'll have that package connection function across the WebSocket as well. And so those are all areas that we're working to kind of elevate together and give those frontline admins the ability to really control that process there, okay? Other than that, let me cancel out of this. These quick tasks that are listed here, you will see us add additional ones of those, as I mentioned, right? And so the beauty of this is, given that this is not a, how do I describe this the right way? It's not a solution you would install via SIM. if you will, right? So it's not a block of code that gets tossed in there. Because of that, we're able to do this a little more out of band, right? So we can build these as quick as we need to, release a pack, say, of 10 quick tasks, right? And you can just run a command and get them tossed in there and ready to go, right? The code, if you will, already exists on the server that you're running anyway. So all you're really doing is exposing that we'll call it a shortcut pack, if that makes sense, right, to you. So that's the plan going forward there. We wanted to get this framework right. David in particular was the one who ran point on this, and he gets a lot of props for spending an obscene amount of time working with all different types of customers, large and small, complex, non-complex, trying to figure out where the common denominator was for these types of tasks and processes and things like that. And this was the amalgamation of that interface that was built there. And so now that we have this framework and this foundation, if you will, now we just need to start filling it up with all kinds of other pieces there. And so, that's pretty much that. Again, we can talk a little bit more about it, but as far as how it behaves and operates, that's it in a nutshell. Role and scope security, just in case I didn't mention it, is all done via the normal role and scope security. So go into the traditional security model there. I believe you will see a line item for, I think it's workspaces is what it's actually listed as right there. By default, anyone who's in the Altiris administrators group has access to the workspaces. If you want to clone that and drop rights down, or you want to create a new group and add rights to it, that's the particular piece you would need access to. Time critical management lives there as well. So you may find a situation where, like Yashim, for example, I'm going to pick on you. We've had some long talks about saying, hey, I want to give the workspaces, I want to give people access to that because I want them to be able to look this stuff up, but I do not want them to have access to the time critical management piece because they'll just go nuts and start running everything they possibly can in real time, right, and blow the network up. Totally okay, right? We've got a few other customers that have some security response folks in the environment that do want access to that time critical management, and they're the only ones that are going to have access to that, right, for those emergency situations. So whatever way makes sense, right, set it up accordingly, okay? And if you struggle with that or run into some situations there, I think we have a KB article on how to kind of scope that out. If not, reach out to us and we'll get something written up for you and show you how to do that. But that's what I got. Any questions, comments? Yes, so I don't know if everybody heard that. This gentleman's transitioning away from DS6.9 and into the ITMS world and is wondering if at some point we will have some imaging quick tasks, that will be part of the workspaces. That is planned. There are some nuances to that we need to kind of take into account and make sure we get them right in there, and we don't want to make the situation worse, if you will, as far as the process is concerned. But yes, on the roadmap, not just yet. Yeah, great question.
Second one.
Yeah, go.
You mentioned remote control. The last time we heard much about remote control, you guys were partnering with BombGuard at one point.
Yeah.
And then there was talk about creating a skinny down BombGuard that you were going to include in the package. Where are you guys at with remote control these days? We ended up buying stuff from BombGuard, so we went that direction with the discounts and things. But are you putting anything into the package again that's going to include remote control?
No, you know what? So that's a great question. So the remote control piece, and everybody knows this, right? We've had PC Anywhere, right? The PC Anywhere event, we'll call it the event, occurred quite a few years ago, right? There were a lot of legitimate reasons for why PC Anywhere needed to go. There were some security issues with it, and it needed to go the way of the dodo, if you will. We did partner with BombGuard, and BombGuard makes a remote control suite. PC Anywhere was targeted at kind of a one-to-one relationship with the endpoint that it was remote controlling. BombGuard really built their product around a help desk-oriented model, right? So the idea was, I have 10 help desk individuals, and they need to be able to control the environment. So all of their licensing, all of those pieces were designed really around that model, which is not the way PC Anywhere was licensed. And so we found with that partnership, while the BombGuard product itself was amazing, and it really is, BombGuard is probably one of the best, if not the best, remote control suite, if you will, on the market. The licensing model and the way those folks do business didn't really translate the right way into where we had it. And as you mentioned, one of the plans was to try to create a BombGuard Lite, if you will, that allowed us to facilitate that licensing model a little bit better. The reality is, for a lot of different reasons, that didn't work out the way we wanted it to. And so we do have some relationships with a few other vendors that have the ability to do remote control and offer remote control at a much more, reasonable price. So if that's something you're looking to do, let us know. But as far as a OEMable, controllable, on our price list, ready to go remote control, that's something we're still on the dating site right now, looking for a partner on, if that makes sense. So we can have some side conversations about that and go from there. But Yeah, that's the best I can give you right now.
To learn more, visit go.symantec.com/manage.